Hello everybody and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn. I'm here with the fantastic Jeremy Lord. What's up, Jeremy? How you doing?
Hey guys. Hey Flynn. How's everything going?
Hey. And we'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are creating and streaming from today and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. What's up, chat? Hi Tara, hi Gareth, Johanna in chat. If you're over on YouTube and you're watching this, jump over to behance.net/live. If we are live, you might be watching on demand, in which case that's not going to do you any help. But if you want to say hi, if you've got some questions, we're doing some illustration over the next couple of days. So we're live here today on Tuesday and also on Thursday. If you're in America, it's Monday and Wednesday. But yeah, these questions always come up around presenting your work, and it's not just illustration, it's kind of every creative, right? I think ever since like I was in design school, one of the, it's always like, how many pieces do I need in a portfolio? Like, how can I turn this personal project into something that looks real? Or how can I turn this design project maybe I really like, and expand on it and kind of present it as professional work? And that's the sort of idea that Jeremy and I were chatting about and thought we would chat about a little bit today and show you some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you're right, it is one of the questions that I get the most as a teacher, is kind of seeing students kind of take this work, which is really good, and then I guess kind of shoot themselves in the foot by how they present it and how they make it look, and not getting the full potential, and then like maximizing on the work that they've done and showing their work. And it's something that we're kind of going to cover more on Thursday in the second episode, how to kind of literally just show your work. It's a very kind of simple statement, but it has huge implications in how you do this. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go through the creation part of this and talk a little bit more about my process, which I've done a few times. If you kind of seen those streams, you'll be familiar with kind of how I work. But what I thought I'd kind of structure this as is I've recently just completed this piece here for a synthwave band that I'm a huge fan of called Arcade High.
Cool.
And so this is obviously a live brief. It went to production. It had a brief behind it, but it's typically the kind of thing that I would do for myself, right? Like, this is dream brief. This like ticks all the boxes for me in terms of like the industry that it's in, the style that it's kind of, blending together, doing a little bit of type. It's got the 80s, it's got the anime, it's got the video game kind of vibes, which is what Arcade High's music is kind of all about. So I think it's a good fit of just, we've spoken about this before, like, do the work you want to be asked to do. And so what I was going to structure today's kind of demo as is this idea of giving yourself a brief, right? Like, how do you give yourself a brief that's going to potentially get you similar work for that client or a similar client in a similar kind of industry? And then on Thursday, we'll look at how to like actually present that and put it out there for the world to see.
Nice.
So we'll start, obviously, as always, with kind of, skipping ahead, a little bit of a brief that like you would write yourself. So this is me on the phone with Arcade High, kind of taking notes of what they're telling me. But typically I would do this for myself as well, right? So when there's no like external brief from a client asking for this or that, I would still kind of do this, sketching up and writing down and taking notes of, these are the things that I'm going for. So we've got, not so much Japan, more kind of Europe. It's kind of like Dark Souls, Final Fantasy 17 kind of vibe. Colors, cyberpunk, not really that at all, not very Akira.
I love the no triangles. Like, no upside down triangles. It's so funny. It's so important to ask clients and even yourself, like, what isn't this? I remember years ago, and this relates to you, Jeremy, when Tractor, the branding was coming on, like one of the things of the brief was like no actual tractors, no like, tractor prints or anything like that. Like, people, like the client, it's often very useful to hear what they don't want as much as what they do want.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, it helps you just to kind of understand what they're looking for. Like what we don't want, I think sometimes can be more important than what we do want, and more kind of defining to the brief.
Yeah.
So this is all, a brief from the client, but like I said, I would kind of do this. They're thinking of, from the onset, of putting this on a t-shirt. So it's going to be screen printed. which means limited colors, which you guys will see kind of how that impacts my work. As you guys probably have seen before, I like to use lots and lots of colors. Anytime it's screen printed and I have to limit to like 5 or 6 colors, it's basically just kind of like hampering my style, but it doesn't necessarily have to be as well. There's some kind of smart ways that you can go around this. And then the light blue is just the color of the t-shirt that they were going to print on. So again, this is the brief. I might not go into this much detail when I'm doing something like this, but it is something that's going to be important going forward. So from there, I would jump online and just find heaps and heaps of research and reference material just to kind of get me going. So some of it is inspiration, and other will be reference, right? So the idea here is that she's kind of like suit of armor, kind of Dungeons and Dragons, medieval, but maybe with a kind of an 80s twist, so something a little bit more modern. So instead of like full suit of armor, maybe she's wearing like a Letterman jacket over it, kind of like, right. Class of 1984 or something along those lines. Maybe she's got those kind of rad, like high top 80s kind of sneakers. So things like this would be reference material to like see how these things actually look. And then stuff like this would be maybe more kind of like inspiration material of like, these are kind of ideas that I can kind of bounce around and see how I can go. So from there, I would literally just jump in and start sketching. So let's go ahead into Photoshop. And we've got a A3 document. Again, thinking ahead here, they want this on a t-shirt. They kind of specified certain dimensions. So I'm going to work at A3 simply because A3 is a good size. It's probably a little bit big for t-shirt, but better to work too big than too small when you're working in Photoshop, because you can't rescale without losing that resolution. So A3, as always, I am in RGB. So always my work in RGB.
Even though you know that it's going to be printed?
So when it's screen printed, doesn't matter so much because it's not necessarily RGB CMYK, but it's also like most printers nowadays will have an RGB CMYK printer. So yeah, that's all good.
Yeah.
And then, basically now's kind of time to start sketching. So one of the things that I'll do at this stage, if I'm working for a client and even for myself, is I'll start by, not that it matters too much on this, but let's say this was for a poster. Let's say like I'm briefing myself here. I'm not super clear on what I need to do or kind of what I'm going to use this as. So I would literally sketch out an A3 kind of block here, and just do this, all right? So getting a little bit crazy on the scrolls. I'm just lining out a rough kind of A3 on a new layer, and then I'm going to resize this and use this as a frame for all of my sketches. So they're all kind of going to be nice and clean. I'll label this frame, and then I'll make a new layer, and then I can go to town and start kind of sketching this out.
I like that, even just that way that you made the thumbnail. Like I would have thought I would have cut it in half or something, but yeah, like scaling it down like that, it works.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
It can do, yeah. And again, like, this is going to go on a t-shirt, so I probably won't be exactly A3, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Often I'll kind of bypass this and just kind of eyeball it and do something like this. But it can be important to do this if you are working to a specific format to give yourself that clean frame, just so you know kind of how you're working and what's going to fit where and all that kind of stuff. So from here, the client also gave me this one as a reference. So this one, I don't know if anybody's ever played this one. This is super, super old school kind of Dungeons and Dragons adventure, kind of top down, old school Zelda kind of vibe, turn-based game. So they really like this kind of vibe. So I'm going to start working to this, and it needs to reference this in a visible way so that people who know will kind of recognize this, but it also obviously shouldn't just be a copy of this. So it can be a little bit of a fine line and back and forth, but you want to have that reference so people go like, oh, this reminds me of like Shining Force. You want that to be the case, right? So you need to kind of have that be in there. And then I want, like action. I don't necessarily want something that's going to be kind of too still. And there I go. I haven't even started sketching in my window yet. So logo is going to go up here, something like this. And at this stage, not too fast, literally just kind of writing these things down as we go. And then, just start sketching away. So I'm just doing kind of main blocks here. I might do kind of like line of action stuff and see how that goes. So line of action is just a quick way to get, a nice dynamic pose into something. So for instance, let's say that she's kind of fighting off like a couple of skeletons, and we got feet and knees, and literally just kind of doing a stick figure here, right? So this is how like most of my drawings would kind of start if I'm drawing people. It's literally just a matter of doing this, and you get obviously you get better at this the more you kind of do it. You get to know where your proportions are and what's kind of wrong and right in terms of like the human body and all this, and making sure that this is like static, not static, sorry, quite well balanced is obviously going to be crucial. So one arm over here, maybe kind of like holding shields. And again, not too fussed about what's going on here. This is literally just like the hand. It's fine for now. We can come back a little bit later and dress this up and kind of fix it all up. Making sure that we have a nice kind of strong pose is the main thing here. We don't want it to feel kind of like she's just kind of lightly defending herself or just kind of softly swinging a sword. We want this to really be like she's really going for it.
And do you ever use reference
all the time? All the time. So in this instance, you'll see I have taken a photo of my partner's hands for reference material. So hands is always like one of those things that you kind of do that I feel like I need some help with. And so reference material, obviously I'm just wrapping paper, but it works. Like you don't need to be fancy here. Reference material is always going to be really kind of good way to do this. If you can find, like these kind of things on various sites, you can find lots of references of how to draw certain things. This kind of stuff can be super helpful. Like you can take, I like how the legs work here. So maybe I'll take the legs and just kind of make my own upper body, all this kind of stuff. So reference, like hugely, hugely important when you're doing this. And I'd say even like the danger is when you go like, oh, I know how to do this. And it's like, maybe you do, but often it can also be kind of like you think you know how to do this, and actually that's tricking you into doing it really badly, because like you need to actually look up the right answer for this, because you think you know, but you don't.
Think you know, but you don't. I love it. Hey, what's up, new people that have joined us in chat? So we're hanging out with Jeremy Lord. We're going through some illustration today, and we kind of have this underlining theme of Jeremy's going to be illustrating this particular piece of work with the goal of using that piece of work that we create today on Thursday to show how he might present that in his portfolio, so online portfolio. So if there's any questions obviously around the process, ask away. But of course, if there's anything around like your own portfolio or questions that you often have that you don't have answers to around presenting work or kind of showing your style on your website, that sort of thing, that's kind of the theme we're going for today. So feel free to ask away in Behance chat. Hey Laura, hey Adam, nice to see you in here. And just say hi, let us know what's up. I think the funniest question that would always come up is like, how many pages do I need to have in my portfolio? What do you do when someone asks you that question? What's your answer to that one?
Usually, like, that's the wrong question to ask.
Right.
is my answer for something like this. I mean, obviously, like, it's a concern, right? Like, I'm not kind of trying to like downplay like that's a stupid question, because it is a legit question, and it is something that like a lot of people will look at. Like if you rock up to an interview and your portfolio it has like 3 pages, it might seem a little bit funny. But in principle, at the end of the day, like if those 3 pages are incredible, like all have like insane work on them, then I guess in a sense that shouldn't really matter too much. So yeah, I definitely like quality over quantity is what I would say. But one of the things that we're going to look at on Thursday is this idea that like I think a lot of people who are just kind of starting out and making their portfolio for the first time don't necessarily get this idea that like one project should not equal one page. Like spread your work out over a bunch of pages. So we'll take a good look at that on Thursday as well, and kind of show you guys how to, like make the most out of your work and how to turn things into projects rather than just like, here's a piece. Right. And I think that's how you want to kind of think about it a little bit more, is like projects, not pieces, not one-off kind of things that you can't really just like, this is a thing. It's like, it's all about the context. So yeah, I'd say, again, if your work is amazing, it doesn't really matter how many pieces are in your portfolio, but obviously there is a bit of a kind of like a middle ground of like, I'm just going to show one insane piece. Like, maybe not great, but yeah, I don't necessarily think people should be too worried about quantity and more kind of focus on quality instead.
Nice.
All right, so I'm pretty happy with this. As you guys saw, like I've done a lot of, things like taking this and moving it around and kind of rejigging proportions as I'm going, which is why it's important to not get too bogged down into detail at this stage. Because you're going to be changing stuff a lot. Often I'll jump up into my Liquify tool up here and start messing around with that to not necessarily redraw stuff, but just, move stuff around, make sure that everything is where I kind of need it. This is a really good one as well, the kind of the move tool for, trying to get that kind of lean in the back. She's really kind of leaning into this, smashing a skeleton with her shield over here, and just fixing proportions and trying to get all the right tools in here. I'll make this a little bit smaller. Maybe this arm needs to be a little bit, you can see like the difference here is pretty significant in terms of like this one feels a little, she's not kind of, her torso's too straight, whereas this is a little bit more kind of lean in there, like trying to get that balance. Same thing here, if I take this arm and just kind of rotate that, and one of the things I can do when I'm rotating arms or legs is just move the rotation point to where the shoulder is, and then that can be like,
so you
little
move it to the
animated
joint.
kind of, and
That's
it just
cool.
means that I don't have to like move it, like rotate it and then move it. It's just kind of like, yay, it's just like swinging a tankard. So stuff like this where it's like, just a little bit more kind of like mid-action pose is always going to be just that little bit more dynamic, and trying to see like, where should that sword go, because obviously she's going to be holding the sword and it's going to go potentially out this way. So we don't want to like hide her face. So compositional things as well are obviously a big deal with this kind of stuff. Like if I'm, taking this, and sometimes I'll do this and I'll draw it on a separate layer because it's obviously overlapping a lot of my drawing now. So when I rotate this, it'll rotate a lot of the torso as well. So yeah, it's, things to kind of consider when you're doing this kind of stuff as well. Pretty happy with all of this and trying to kind of find out. Yeah, that's not bad.
Nice. So there's a bit of trial and error. Even if you think you've got it right, would you
100%.
Even if you think you've got it right, like, will you get in there and kind of wiggle the arms around, wiggle the joints around just a little bit to be like, did I get it right, or could it be a little bit better? Is
there a better way to do this? Is there a better pose? Could I do like something where this foot, for instance, might be this knee might be a little bit more bent because she's resting her foot on like a skeleton, so she's like kind of smashing it a little bit, so that could be interesting as well. Like, this is where you kind of play around with all the composition and kind of see what works best, right? Because you haven't spent heaps of time drawing a super detailed hand. You've literally just gone in and done some very, very, very loose things. So you're not going to be afraid to kind of change them, and it's not going to take you very long to change them. So like now's the time to make sure that everything is right, and working the way you want it, that all the proportions are right. Maybe the head's a little bit big here. Zoom out as well is always a good kind of way to do it. And try stuff. Actually, I made that a little bit too small. So again, like these kind of things of identifying too big, too small are stuff that like things that come with experience, and trying to like figure out how to, structure the human body and all that kind of stuff is just you learn to get an eye in for it.
Yeah.
A good tip as well that a lot of people do would be to flip.
I was going to say, do you have to flip it?
Yeah. So flipping it means you get a fresh look on stuff, because your eye has a tendency to get used to mistakes and just kind of gloss over them and go like, no, that's fine. Whereas flipping it means you get a fresh look, and all of a sudden your eye is not used to those mistakes, and a lot of those mistakes become a little bit more glaringly obvious. So that's a really good way to kind of, see, have I made any mistakes here? What are the proportions? At this stage, I'm feeling like her knee's probably not in the right place, and so on and so forth. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of back and forth here with all this kind of sketching, and how that all kind of works. I should do her hair while I'm here as well. So we're going for the kind of like, again, nice long hair is going to give us a little bit more of a dynamic feel. I just stuck this on a new layer so that I can go crazy and kind of see how that's going to look like this. So that's pretty good. Pretty happy with that.
Interesting side fact. Shining Force is available on Steam for $1.35 Australian.
Huh?
So if you want to have a go.
If you're into turn-based, then do it. If you're not, probably don't. You'll be a bit frustrated because it is a turn-based thing, which is personally not my jam.
Can be good. I think it's hard to get right.
Yeah, cool. So pretty happy with how all that looks. Maybe just give a little bit more hints of the face in there. And like I said, we're going for that kind of like anime manga style. So we're going to go like the big eyes. A hint of a nose. And then, yeah, the hair is kind of all right. So from here, what I would normally do is I would label this layer base, and then I would make a new layer, call it gear, where I'm basically going to dress this a little bit. And I usually kind of pick a different color just so that I can kind of see what I'm doing. I usually go with blue and pink.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? And then this is where I can start going to town a little bit and go like, all right, cool. So we got shoulder pads. And again, flipping back to this and going like, what do shoulder pads look like on suits of armor? We got this kind of suit of armor. We got something like this. What else can we kind of do? Like leather pads or like full like armor plate pads. What do we do? How does this like kind of get structured? What's the idea kind of articulated, everything. So that's, good for like reference and inspiration. So going to stick that in here, get this kind of like round shoulder pad on her, maybe chuck some spikes on there because she's super hardcore.
I noticed you did like a quick reference of what you're illustrating at the sketch phase, but you're not like dropping it into Photoshop and like kind of trying to copy
not really.
it. So why is that? Is it more like I just want to get an idea and then I want to sketch it down and I'll kind of make it my own a bit, so it's not kind of a direct copy, or something else?
Yes, let's say that that's the case. It's actually more the case is just that I'm lazy and I don't want to kind of start to clutter my file with all these different kind of layers.
Right.
But that can often be the case, right? When it's something a little bit more complicated, that needs to be like a little bit more closely referenced. Like I did an illustration, like a personal piece recently for Aliens, where it's like Ripley, like, the character, and she's got the gun with the flamethrower attached. So that was one of those where I got a photo online and I stuck it into my thing, and it was like just sitting here and I referenced that. So that's good to kind of not have to switch back and forth and all that kind of stuff. But what you said is also true. It's also just kind of like there's a temptation there to just kind of copy what you see, whereas if you just go and glance and go like, here's a bit of an idea, oh, this is how it kind of looks and this is how it could work, is just going to mean that you're going to create it yourself rather than have that kind of tendency to copy stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, if I'm being honest, it's also just like, you know, I'm going to do lots and lots of layers on this probably, just because I know how I tend to work, and I'll like try different things. Like I'll try like, what if the Letterman jacket is here, and or what if it kind of does this instead, or like if it's opened or closed, and then that will just kind of be different layers. So, you know, I do need to be a little bit kind of conscious of my layers. So I try not to go too crazy on those layers.
Yeah.
But you can totally do that. Like, you know, Photoshop does allow you to just like grab one of these if you need to, and just kind of like drop it in. Oop, not that, wrong format. But that's a web page format. That's why that hasn't worked.
That's been happening a lot more lately.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
Clicking and dragging images, they tend to like grab the like as a web like URL or something. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, it's super strange. So yeah, so I will do that.
Anyone else notice that?
Often, sometimes.
Or is it just us?
And yeah, so again, just putting in the Letterman jacket and making sure that's all good. I'm leaving it open because I want to be able to kind of showcase a little bit of like a suit of armor inside, like underneath. So she's still wearing her like, you know, like suit of armor bodice kind of thing. And again, making sure that we are working with something that's going to kind of hold the shape a little bit better. So this is where I'd go back into my liquify tool and just kind of bring that in a little bit more and make sure that we can kind of see the shapes. And again, as you can see, like that's kind of cutting into my reference base material underneath it, but I'm not too fussed about that at this stage. And then, yeah, we're going to just stick on some kind of flanking kind of suit of armor here, again, from the reference that we saw before. And then that one's going to sit kind of a little bit closer right here. And then those guys can attach. And then we'll just kind of stick a strap there and another one right here. Knee pads. And then underneath that, she's obviously wearing kind of like jeans. So that's going to be...
Because it's 80s.
Yeah, tight jeans, easy to draw because they literally just kind of follow the shape of the body. So that's a bit of a no-brainer. Shields, nice big kind of round shields. And this is where maybe I'll go back in on my base and start kind of resolving things a little bit better. So this needs to go, and then we've got like a fist. So again, like I've done a few kind of hands kind of in a fist before, so I kind of know what I'm doing a little bit. But if you're like struggling with stuff like this, then absolutely, you know, highly recommend do not waste time trying to do this yourself. If you're kind of struggling, try it once, try it twice. If the third time it's still not going, then like, yeah, go to your reference material and do it that way. You'll save a lot of time and kind of headaches doing these things.
Yeah. We've got a question from chat. Do you have a favorite material to draw, clothing or otherwise? I guess that's off the jeans comment, how it's like easy to draw because it just follows the leg shape.
I like drawing stone and wood.
Stone and wood.
Clothing, like cloth
like
is not... You like the beer, yeah. Cloth is... I struggle a little bit with cloth folds and stuff, like how, you know, wrinkles go. Like things on jeans, for instance, like if it's like a leg that kind of comes down, is relatively straightforward. Like it obviously like crinkles in here. And that's nice and kind of clean and simple to do. The other thing with jeans that's cool is you got usually a seam, and so you can use the seam as a kind of like, you know, thing that shows folds a little bit better.
Right.
But as soon as you're talking about like a loose t-shirt or something, it's like, whoa, it starts to get a bit funky. Like I struggle with that stuff a little bit, if I'm honest. So it's not my favorite thing to draw because I'm not very good at it. But yeah, stuff like wood or like stone is just super organic and easy to draw. And there's not really any kind of rhyme or reason to it too much, or at least not at kind of first sight. So yeah,
Nice.
interesting question. So yeah, so putting in shoes. Another thing as well, if you struggle with feet and stuff, like feet and hands are always kind of like artist kryptonite. You can do this thing where it's like, all right, well, maybe I'm going to put a tuft of grass here, and maybe she's like standing in tall grass, and that stops me from having to draw her feet altogether. Problem solved.
Right.
It's a little bit of a cop out. But you'll see plenty of artists do this kind of stuff where it's like, I can't figure this out. I'm just going to not draw it, and I'm going to hide it behind something else. So yeah.
So an artist that comes up like all the time on the internet, and he or she draws with like the hands are always black as if they're wearing glasses, and I think it's because it's an easy silhouette to make. Yeah. Because you can it's a lot easier to draw the silhouette without any of the kind of anything else over the top. There's
definitely like tricks like that you can do that just like simplify your artwork a little bit and just make it a lot easier for you to do.
Until your client says, "Hey, I really need to see those feet. Can you move the grass?"
Yeah. Well, again, in the spirit of today's stream, we're talking about like briefing yourself. So you can just, if you're doing this for yourself, then you can just change the brief if you want to. And hey, clients do that all the time as well. So there you go. So we need to throw some skellies in here as well. So stick a new layer. I like doing these streams because it forces me to be a good boy and like label my layers, which I never do. You're seeing me at my. Have you saved your work
yet?
No, I haven't. There you go.
Okay. You never know.
Yeah, this is true. So again, skeletons are super fun and easy to draw because it's literally they are just stick figures. Like you guys saw when I started doing this, you can see the stick figure kind of elements in here of this body. So when you're doing the skellies, it's the same thing, right? It's literally just like a rib cage that comes down, few lines. And obviously once I start doing this like properly in like full detail, it's going to get a little bit more complicated because I have to draw all the ribs in the rib cage, and it starts to get a little bit more complicated. But at first it's really just a matter of like knowing your anatomy and being able to kind of draw these things a little bit more kind of clearly.
Yeah.
But it's just literally just kind of super easy of like, here's just a skelly leg is just boop, that's it. Goes down to a knee, and we're good to go.
Nice.
So I'm not sure about the skeleton on this one, but we'll leave it like this for now. We'll kind of delete this layer. We'll leave it be like this. I'm going to jump into inking this up a little bit more. I'd probably spend a little bit more time kind of, cleaning up the details and resolving things, which is a pet peeve of mine. Is like I want the piece to kind of progress. I want to be finished sooner. And so I'll just kind of take shortcuts and be like, future me can deal with it. And then future me comes in inking time, and it's just like, damn, you passed me. Why didn't you draw this? You should have finished this off, because now I got to do it while I'm inking. Yeah. So it's always a good kind of discipline to just be like, no. Do your prep, do the things. It'll mean an easier job later on. But let's screw over future me and jump in and do this. So again, I would traditionally do a bunch of these if I'm kind of working for a client. So I'll just duplicate that, do another kind of series of things. Always a good idea to number these as well when you're doing it. So when you're showing this to a client, like send this over and like label them 1, 2, 3. It saves them from having to go like, the one second row in the middle next to the one where she's swinging.
Right.
It's like, no, number 1 with like the head of number 2, super easy for clients to kind of do that. So always a good idea to kind of number or letter them or whatever system you want to do. So I'm literally just going to make this bigger. It's going to lose a lot of resolution, but it's just a sketch, so nobody cares. Because it will be deleted in the end.
Nice.
And yeah, so there we go. I'm going to group all of those, call those sketch, and then drop the opacity of that group down to like 30. And then I'm going to start inking this. So this is where I would jump into my brush. Up here, brushes, there we go. And I've got a few brushes that I downloaded from Carl T. Webster, so the site that is linked from Photoshop. So if you go in here and say, get more brushes, it'll take you to Carl T. Webster's site where you can just download and install them, super easy to do. So I use this one. So Carl's Manga Smoothie, and then I've made my own kind of version of that, which is just round, I call it round Inko. That's just what I use. It's on smoothing 27%, just because I like to have nice, clean, smooth lines. But yeah, those are basically the brushes that I use like 90% of the time. The rest of them, they're fun to have, but it's a little bit more like, you got to be able to do it with the simple things. Otherwise, it might just become a little bit gimmicky and just get in the way of stuff. So then it's literally just me going and labeling my layers like a good boy. There we go.
Gold star.
And then just going in and kind of inking that up a little bit.
Nice. Hey, while you're doing that, I got to give you a shout out because I daily get notifications from your pixel art YouTube video that you did with Adobe. Because the notification's kind of going crazy. So if anyone wants to see really great, like 10-minute, so short tutorial on guide to pixel art, Jeremy has an awesome one that I think Johanna can share a link for us in the chat. It has like 300,000 views, and so I just kept getting pinged.
It's crazy.
It's nuts. And so obviously it's been picked up and traveling around. It's a really great tutorial. So if you want to check that out, we've done some live streams with Jeremy on pixel art as well. So there's definitely longer versions in the catalog if you want to check that out. But he's done a short and sweet guide. If that's your jam, check it out.
Thanks. Yeah, look, pixel art is super fun. It's like the opposite of everything that I'm doing here.
Yeah.
But in a sense, it's also like, in terms of like spirit, it's very much aligned with the kind of the vibe and the kind of styles that I like to work with. But yeah, it's a thing in and of itself. But it's it's just something that I really enjoy working in. And I often feel like maybe I should just do only pixel art. Maybe that'll be my thing forever now. But then I just can't get away from this kind of stuff here. This is also like super fun to do and a little bit more kind of involved. This is where maybe I'm just going like, again, damn you past me. This hand is just looking like a giant ham sandwich. I hate it. It's not working at all.
Oh, no.
So either I would try and be lazy and trying to like liquefy it back to life. Sometimes you just got to be ruthless and just kill it and start again, and try and get, and this is where maybe I would also do this on a separate layer. And rather than do this kind of smooth inking, I would literally just try and do something a little bit cleaner from the onset, like this. And then I can kind of go over it a little bit later on, zooming out to see like, yeah, that's better. All right. So finger number 1.
So you're like redoing your sketch lines? Is that what you're doing?
I'm just kind of going over with my sketching pen, which has the smoothing, which kind of forces me to be slow, a little bit more kind of settled. This was a revelation I had. I was watching a documentary on Hayao Miyazaki and like how he draws. And he's literally just like, that temptation of kind of like sketching and drawing lots of lines. And it's just like, no. Just like take your time, draw, think about what you're drawing when you're drawing it, do it nice and slowly, take your time. And so the smoothing on this, because it's not as responsive as if it wasn't there, it forces me to slow down and actually pay attention to what I'm doing. and it just means a little bit more room for detail. But there still can be some mistakes, like that pinky is really fat, and I don't love it either, but yeah. Again, this is where, like good reference if you're really struggling. And in this case, what I should do is like stop, take a photo of my hand or my partner's hand in this way, and then just literally kind of trace, I guess, or like use that as reference if you want to. But yeah, it's always kind of important to make sure that stuff looks right. Otherwise, it's just going to be like you're going to start building further and adding detail, and it's just going to be nagging you and like, it's not right. Something's not right about this. What is it? You just need to change the thing, and that's it. Like, there's no two ways around it.
Yeah, makes sense. How good is this brush for making a sword? Because it just the edge is perfect for the sharpness of a sword.
Yep, and we can do some little like, swords seen some life, seen some stuff in its kind of lifetime.
Not the first skellies that she's faced.
No, she's definitely had a few battles in her life. So again, I'm going a little bit faster than I would, and being less kind of like detailed and resolved than I kind of probably would a lot of the time. But again, like we've kind of covered my kind of super thorough process in a lot more detail in previous streams, so have a watch of those. And I don't want to spend too much time doing this because we will need to move forward into the kind of the portfolio side of things and the production side of things a little bit later. But you're getting the kind of the fast forwarded version of how this would kind of actually work and what I would do to a piece like this.
Cool. And yeah, chat, we've got like, I'd say a bit over like 12 minutes left or something like that. So if you've got any questions, throw them in while we're here. And I'll just put a little plug in for our next episode, which is in 2 days. So it's on Thursday if you're in Australia or Asia Pacific, and Wednesday if you're in the US. And we'll be kind of using this piece as an example to show how you could take something like this, assuming it was a personal project, and expand on it and kind of put it into a portfolio so it, is presented professionally, I think would be a good word to use. We do have a question from Bill Hope, our good friend. Hey, Bill, hope you're doing well.
Bill Hope, no pressure.
Hey, Jeremy, what are you doing? No, just kidding. Hey, Jeremy, interesting to hear you talk about drawing speed. Good tip. I notice you keep the brush width pretty consistent. Is that a stylistic choice, or do you find it easy to control?
It's a stylistic choice, absolutely, 100%. I would actually find it easier to have, like this kind of stuff in here where there's kind of different weights. Feels a little bit more natural. Every now and then I will go and do this a little bit more kind of like you can see the brush strokes. But some of the other pieces that you'll see, like I'll jump forward actually and show the finished piece of this, so you can kind of see what that's going to look like. Obviously, it's a slightly different pose. So this is kind of what it looks like. And all these, the width is like a bit kind of slimmer in certain parts, and obviously what's in the background has a thinner width because we don't want to kind of highlight that too much. We want the hero to be the thing that you see first, so things that are off in the distance have a thinner line, a thinner stroke on them. But it's a stylistic thing of like skateboard art is kind of how I got into this, and that screen printing and that nice thick black outline. It's also kind of reminiscent of manga. When it's all cleaned up, it's a very kind of clean, smooth line. You don't necessarily see kind of strokes and kind of that sketchiness to it. So it's a really good question because it is something that I have chosen to do from a stylistic approach, absolutely. But there are times when it's kind of super fun to just go, a little bit more natural and kind of clean than this kind of super clean outline. And just get something where you can see the work in there. That's absolutely something that I kind of try and do sometimes.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Thanks for the question, Bill. That's an awesome Love having like such an informed question from someone
Absolutely.
such as yourself.
I got a bit scared there that he was going to be like, dude, your proportions are all wrong. He is like the human proportion king.
Yeah. We did a great stream with Bill Hope. We were talking a bit in this stream about poses and references. I believe the website was called Bodies in Motion. And we were using that website in a great stream with Bill. Check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about poses and human anatomy and drawing, and a couple of like tips and techniques and stuff into how to kind of improve your drawing, because that's, I think, something that has comes up when you're asked as well, Jeremy, like, how do I draw? How do I learn how to draw? And learning to draw, like life drawing and human anatomy, I think it's always the answer that people say to start with, to practice.
It's the New York of drawing, right? Like, you can make it here, you can make it anywhere.
Right.
If you can do life drawing well, then like you're good, because you understand the fundamentals of like the difference in between seeing and looking at stuff. For instance, like you can look at stuff, but you're not necessarily seeing it. Like, I always do this test of people who live in Sydney, for instance. Like, you ask them how many sails are on the Opera House, and it's crazy how few people know, because you've seen it before, like you've looked at it before, but you've never really seen it. Whereas when you sit down and you sketch it, like if you go and look at it, anybody who's ever drawn the Opera House for like half an hour sitting there will absolutely know the answer to that. Anybody kind of just looking at it and taking photos of it casually as a tourist will not really know. So it's that thing of like, understanding how stuff works. Yeah, it is 9. Yeah.
Okay.
Which seems crazy, right? Like, you wouldn't think it would be 9.
Yeah,
but
I think it'd be like 6 or something.
Yeah, exactly. Which is what most people say, like 5 or 6. And it's like, no, it's 9. And they're like, what? Really? No.
Yeah. I think I'm cheating a little bit, because I think we've spoken about it on stream before, and I'm pretty sure I got it wrong. I'm pretty sure I undercooked it.
Yeah, and again, like it's one of those things, right? Like, you just why would you know that stuff in the first place? But it is that kind of thing of like life drawing teaches you to look at stuff and like analyze it, and like actually the angle on her torso here is not right, and like I got to fix that, and how would this work, and where would these kind of leather straps kind of link onto, all this kind of jazz. So yeah, let's draw in the eyes real quick. I'd probably spend a little bit more time on the eyes than I am doing now, but just for the sake of this, just so we're kind of getting a little bit more expression, I might even just turn her into an elf all of a sudden. Why not?
Oh, suddenly an elf.
Yep.
Just like that.
Brief has changed. She's now an elf. Yeah, and again, we've got that like typically kind of manga hair, the huge kind of fringe with the cuts, that kind of things in there.
Bangs.
Now that Bill has said that to me, like I just want to draw it like stylistically and kind of like roughly like this. The other reason, actually, and I think that's why it's such a good question for me, is because when I'm then going to color it in, I like to have that nice, clean, solid closed line, so that I can kind of delineate where stuff is exactly. Whereas having things like this, for instance, which is just not that's not closed off right here. That's going to mean like, where does my color stop? Where does it begin? How do I block all these things off? So it always, it's one of those kind of things is that helps me just get that right there as well. So it's a convenience / kind of stylistic decision, which I think, like, I'd say that probably a lot of artists, the medium that they work in and the style that they work that medium in is probably derived from a way of working as well, like a desire to work in a certain way, or like, obviously it's also how that feels and you're good at it and all those different things. But if you're like Alex, for instance, Alex Lahours, who works with a lot of kind of like flat colors because he's doing spray paints, or at least like a lot of the stuff is spray paints. He tends to work in gradients as well when he's doing the big kind of gray portraits, but he uses Illustrator, and he works in a way that's going to work with that as well. So yeah, I think, don't feel too kind of hemmed in by a certain style, try and sort of think about how you work and how you like to work, and pick a style or like a medium accordingly.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't even say pick a style, because it's not really just like, here's a list of styles that you could have.
Right. Not like choosing really your starter like Pokemon.
That. Yeah, because inevitably if you do that, then obviously you're going to choose the thing that already exists, which increases the chances that someone else is already doing this and maybe doing it better or more like intelligently than you would. All right. Yeah, we're pretty good right now. I'm going to start adding some color into this.
Cool. We've only got a few minutes left, just by the way, letting you know.
Yep. So I've got a color palette that I will kind of choose for this. I'll obviously always kind of work with a certain amount of colors and not worry too much. But on something like this, I would just have to pick like 5 or 6 colors because it's screen printed. So the more colors you have in screen print, the more expensive the production becomes. So you got to be a little bit more kind of, thoughtful of your colors. But this is where I would just start kind of thinking about like, all right, I'm going to go, let's say this kind of like pale skin tone for the skin. And I would often do this thing where I would go in and do the entire thing, right? So we won't do this right now because it'll take a while. And I'm just using the lasso tool. And this is a technique that I saw a lot of kind of concept artists will do when they're working on stuff, is to paint the entirety of your shape, like basically make a silhouette in one color and label that layer base, right? And what it will do later on is it'll allow you to make a quick selection of everything in your drawing at the drop of a hat. So bang. And this is, again, I've spoken about this before as well. This is where my thick outline helps because I'm using my lasso tool. So if my, line here is a bit shaky, it doesn't really matter because it's hidden inside the kind of the thickness of that line. So again, it's a convenience thing as well with this kind of stylistic approach. But yeah, so what I would then do, for instance, is this is a base layer. And if I hit Command and click on the thumbnail, you can see that it's actually selected the entirety of that thumbnail. Right. So it's just a quick way for me to then go like, all right, I can actually like take this and duplicate it and turn it into a shadow. So for instance, I would just do something like this, change the lightness of this, and then stick a layer mask on it. Again, I'm kind of zooming through this now because we're running out of time and we've covered this a bunch of times before. But this will then kind of allow me to create, very, very quick shading on something like this and get this sense without having to be super clean with my line work again. Right? So it's just a really nice way to tell Photoshop like, hey, remember this thing? I want you to like keep it like stored in the bank, and I'm going to come back to it a bunch of times, and I don't want to have to reselect it every time. So you hold on to this layer for me. And that base layer might not even be in the final piece. It might just be something that I use as a working thing to allow me to make selections or layer masks very, very quickly. So it's something that I think is always going to be super handy for me to do. So
it's super useful. But we are actually out of time, my friend.
Awesome.
And everybody. So thanks for that. This is awesome. So like I said a bunch of times, we'll be back on Thursday. We're using this artwork, the final artwork, I think.
So this one.
This one.
This one.
I was like, I can't see it. Oh, cool. Awesome. So we'll be using this one and like expanding on it, showing you how to present it in a portfolio. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. It's going to be a good conversation, good chance to ask questions about your own portfolio and stuff like that too. So thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the questions. Looking forward to Thursday. And yeah, make sure you bring lots of questions with you because it's going to be, I think, quite interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time, good chat. And we're going to leave you with the video for Adobe Max. Make sure you register and check it out. There's lots of good stuff coming there. Just a month away. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, everybody. See you on Thursday.
Guys.